Good day, everyone. In our previous training, we worked on a simple calculator, a educational calculator that calculates a student's grades for a user, whereby you input a student score and is going to, produce the grade and which particular grade system the student falls under. But how about we take it up a notch and we work on, or before we talk about what we work on, have you ever, as a user, have you ever been spending a lot of money, without knowing how much you have spent, how much you have spent in total, what's the average you have spent, probably in a week, in a month, in a year, or like what's the highest you spent on a particular day, or what's the, or let's just do this maybe in a week, what's the highest you spent in a week, what's the highest you have spent, the lowest you have spent in a week. So, well, like I said, we're taking it up a notch. We're going to be working on a daily expense tracker. And in this daily expense tracker, we're going to be building a app that keeps on asking for a user daily expense until the user tells the system to stop. And until the user tells the system that I'm done, we use the word stop or done. So, and then, that's just what we're going to do. So, you know what, let's go into it. So we're working on this system simple expense tracker, simple expense tracker. So we're working on the simple expense tracker. So what are the questions we're going to ask first? Like, what are the questions we need to ask first? So actually, be able to come up with these things. So, we're going to be asking, this simple expense tracker, where are we going to be getting it from? We're going to be getting it from the user. The inputs that are going to be calculated, we'll be getting those inputs from the user. And then we're going to be calculating the sum, which is the total expense. We're going to be calculating the average expense. We're going to be calculating the lowest expense, and we're going to be calculating the highest expense among all of the list of expenses. In this particular way, we're going to be using a list. We're going to be using floats. We're going to be using, and a couple more, we're going to be using loops and all. So to start with, we're building a app that keeps on asking until we tell the system to done, to type done or stop. And then since the user is going to be, one question we should ask first is, since the user is going to be inputting more than one expense, then we need the expense to be stored somewhere, and it's going to be stored in a list. So our first question is, why are we getting the inputs from? Like I said, we are getting the inputs from the user, and since it's going to be more than one input we are going to be calculating, we are going to be using a while loop. So, let's dive straight into it. So I said as first we're going to be storing into a list. So we create a list. Let's call the list expense. Let's call the list expense. And then we're going to be creating an empty list. Empty list. This is an empty list. And then we're going to be asking, the user, whoever is going to be using, we are going to be telling the user to enter a daily expense and type done to quit. Like when the user is done, entering it, the user will type done so as to quit the whole process and produce the results. So we're going to be telling this to say, enter your daily expense and then type done. Type done. Type done to quits. So that's that. Now let's go into our while loop. While loop, while loop is a continuous loop. It keeps on asking. That's why we're not working with just one expense. We are working with a lot of expense, like any number of expense the user wants to put there. So let's assume maybe it's an expense of a week, which is 7 days. The user wants to input expense of 7 days. So we're going to be using a while loop, which is a continuous loop. So we start with while true, let's not forget close, while true, expenses is equal to inputs. I told you before we're going to be asking from the user, which is input. So the system is going to be asking us to input our expense. So enter expense, enter expense. So from there, then what is the next question we're supposed to ask from there? So from the next question we're supposed to ask here, the next question we're supposed to ask here is the um what are we going to be inputting exactly? What are we going to be inputting that? How do I terminate this loop condition that how do I terminate it when it's, like we said in the first place, we said it's going to keep on entering until the user type is done. So our next question now is how do we terminate the loop? Because in a while loop, if you keep on running a while loop, while true, and you keep on running it, it's going to keep on running forever. It's never going to stop because that's what a while loop is a continuous loop, and a while loop would never end unless it meets a condition. So what this place is just telling us is while true, expense input this. So it's going to keep on asking us to input expense. It's never going to stop asking us to input expense. So now, how do we terminate the condition? Let's do that now. So to terminate the condition, we're going to be using the if statements. Let's all make sure everything we're doing is inside the while scope. Don't let us get it out of the while scope because it's going to disrupt our work. So say if expense, sorry, let's use expenses since it's not just one. Let's use expenses. If expenses is equal to done, if it's equal to done, then break. What does this mean? Just saying that if expense here, when you input anything that equals to this done, then it's going to break the whole process. Like I said before, while it's a continuous, it's a continuous thing, it will never stop running until it meets a condition. So here the condition is if what we are inputting is done, then break the whole process. So that is what is going to, happen there. So that's what's going to happen there. And so the next thing we're going to do now, is how do I store this input inside of the list? Well, there's this function, there's this method, we call it append. We're going to be using the append function. But before we get to the append function, get to the append function, we need to look at the string, we need to look at the floats, and because if we look at this now, we see this can actually accept anything. It can accept string, it can accept, but all we want here are integers, all we want here are floats, specifically floats. So what are we going to do there? So what are we going to do there? So what we're going to do is we are going to try and convert every input here. Every input here, we're going to try and convert it to a float. So let's do that. So we're going to be using the try and except. We're going to be using the try and except function. So and what is just the try and except function? The try and except function is just a function that it tries a particular is like a risk and reward thing. It tries a particular function, and then if it meets that function, it continues with the whole, it returns the value and continues. While if it doesn't meet a function, if it doesn't meet a function or if it encounters an error, instead of it to terminate, because most times in Python, when Python encounters an error, it terminates the whole process. But with the try and except error, we don't want it to terminate the whole process. It's just going to flag it out that, okay, it's just going to tell us that there's actually an error here, and then rerun the code for us again. Unlike normally, Python would automatically break everything. That's why we use the try and accept error. So in the try and accept error here, we want to convert every input we are going to put in here. We want to convert it into every input we're going to put in here. We want to convert it into a float. Because if we convert it into an integer, it won't be able to accept floats, but floats can accept both integer and floats. So that's what we're going to be doing here now. So let's do that. So we're going to say, let's just give it x. You can see x is equal to floats of expenses. That is, we're forcing it to convert it to expenses, floats of expenses, and then, like I said try and accept, and then we use the accept exception as error. Yeah, I hope we're not lost here. Well, what this is just saying is try x is equal to float expenses. That means convert everything in expenses here to a float and store in x. That's what it means. And then this exception, if you look at it, it's just a common base for all non-exit exception. What does this mean? Is if it doesn't meet this condition, instead of it to normally to run an error, instead of it to just display, just go down to the terminal where it's running, and then just Python will show you the error. You see all these colors, red colors and all that. This is an error. It's not going to. You are the one. You are the one that's going to tell it what to bring out for you in case it encounters an error. That's just what it means. They are different. Mostly, since what we're working on is a value numbers. So we're supposed to use value error, but except exception is more like the mother of all. It's like the mother of all. Value error we only take anything numbers, while value error will never take string. But with the exception, it will take both strings and value. So yeah, except exception as error, we're going to say print. We're going to say print. We're going to tell it what do we want to see when it encounters an error instead of it terminating everything. So we can just tell it, since we are converting to a float here. So let's assume it's a string. The user input here, a string cannot be converted to a float. So we're just going to tell it. We're going to tell it to just tell us, please input or enter a valid number. Enter a valid number. So that's that about that. And then what's the next thing we are supposed to do here? The next thing to do here is to check, because like I said, every input or inputting is going back to this place, which is going back to this empty list. But then, this empty list, everything we have done here is stored in this X. We still need to send this X to the empty list. And all we want in the empty list are float numbers. That's where the instance comes in. The instance we check just to confirm what we have done here, that okay, what we are getting here and appending to this expense, is it a float? If it's not a float, even if it's not a float, it's automatically going to detect it from here. But this instance is just to confirm that what we are getting is actually a float. So let's do this. Is instance x, that is how instance work, x, and then check if it is a float. And then if this is true, if this is okay, expense floats, and then if this is true, expense dot append. Okay, seems there is an error here. Okay, I made a mistake rather. It's supposed to be if. I was saying it, if instance of x is a float, that's what it's saying. Then if instance of x is a float, True. True. If resistance of X is a float and is equal to true, or you know what, we don't even need to use this. We don't need to use it. This if it's automatically if its distance of X is equal to float, that's just what this means. Then expense dot append then expense dot append X. So we're appending X. What does it append means? Just add everything inside this X, every value in X. We are going to be adding it to expense, which is this list here. So that is just what that means. So, you know, we have basically done everything we need to do. We have basically done everything we need to do. So, you know, let's test this first. Let's print expense. Let's print expense. Let's print expense. Let's run it in our terminal. Let's run it in our terminal. So our terminal is activated. So let's run it in our terminal. So we want to run this in our terminal, main.py. So it's telling us, see, enter your daily expense, type down, we want to enter the first expense. So let's say the first expense is, you know, 300,000. So, okay. Okay, so, it is telling us expense, what is it, what is it telling us here? Expenses, you know, dot append. Okay, it said line 22, there is an error in line 22. Okay, so what is our error? Let's see, let's go through it. Let's go through it. What is the error? What is this telling us? What is this telling us? What is this telling us? Okay, if it is equal to true, then append X. Okay, and then we're printing expenses. Okay, this is supposed to work. Okay, let's check it here and do it again. Do it again. Okay, we're still having the same error. What exactly is the issue here? Expenses. Seems like we have an error somewhere. Okay, we're going to, you know, we're going to detect that. Where is the error coming from? It said trace back most recent call as this line 2. Expenses don't append attribute. String object has no attributes append. Append. Okay, but this is not a string. It's telling us this is not a string. That's the issue with Python sometimes. This is not a string. So let's run through our code again. Let's run through our code again. And then we have insert, enter expense, and then okay. If expense is equal to done, then break, okay, and then try x of floats expenses, yes, except exception as error. Print, enter a valid number. Yes, this is correct. If resistance of x floats, okay, let's see, this is equal to true, then expenses dot append. This is correct. So dot expenses dot append. This is our expenses dot append. Okay, it seems there is an issue here. Coming. Let me check my code base. Seems there's an issue. There's a problem somewhere there. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. Yes. Expense the append. It's correct. It's correct. Okay. 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 Hmm. Okay. Okay. I think I know where I know where the error is coming from. I know where the error is coming from. This is an empty list. So we're not supposed to refer to this empty list yet. Yes. This is an empty list. We're not supposed to refer to this empty list here. Everything we are creating here, this is an empty list. This one, I used expenses here. It's supposed to be expense, not expenses. Supposed to be expense, not expenses. So let's run it again. Expense dot append is going to run this time. Append X. So what the error was here is what the error was here is um that's one thing about Python. Python recognize everything we put there. So we used expenses here. We created a new variable, and this variable is what is asking us to input. So what is asking us to input? The variable we are input what the variable of what we are inputting is expenses. So expenses you see here from expenses we said X is equal to the float. So when expenses is converted, X, so we're trying to send this X back into this list. So if I name the list expenses, it's like as if it's going to contradict each other. And the list is an empty list, so it's supposed to be expense. So now we said if resistance is equal to true, then expense dot append expense dot append X. So let's run this again. It should work this time. So let's say 100,000. Let's say that's 40,000. Okay, say 40,000. Okay. Mm, um, let's just done. I don't want this. Okay, let's run it again. 40,000. Asking us for another expense again. 30,000. 42,000. Okay, 4,200. 200. 6 million. And then done. So okay, let me use this done. There's something I want to show us now. Done. So you can see everything we put here, everything has already been sent into this empty list. So this is the empty list here: 40,000, 30,000, 4,000 this. But there's something I want to show us. Let's run it again. Let's say, you know what, let's just go straight to the okay, let's say 58,000. And then the next thing we do, I want to type done, but maybe my caps lock is on or something. So done. You see what it said? Enter a valid number. You know why? Python is very, very case sensitive. With all what we told Python here is when it sees exactly this done. So sometimes it happens. So the best practice for this kind of thing is to convert anything, even if the user inputs that done in all uppercase or anything, is to convert it to lowercase. So we are going to use the dots. We are going to use the dot lower function. So expensive dot lower, then let's do this again. Let's do this again. Um, then let me look at my done. You see it's all in uppercase. Oh, okay, okay. Okay, sorry. I'm supposed to run the code again. I'm supposed to run the code again, and then let's run it again. Now look at my done. You see, it's in uppercase, but it worked. It didn't flag it to be an invalid number. So it automatically converted it to lowercase because of this dot lower, returning a copy of string converted to lowercase. So now we can see our system is working. Now, how do we calculate the sum, the average and everything? So what we want to do, we want to calculate the total. So we can say total is equal to the sum average is going to be the average of expense. Sorry, it's going to be the average is going to be the total divided by when we're looking for an average of the length of numbers and all like that. So it's going to be the total of that numbers by the total of that numbers by the total number or not total index of that number. So we're going to be using the length function. What this length is just going to count the number of expense. Let's assume we input 7 different expense. Length is going to count those expense from 1 to 7, and then it's going to divide the total addition, which is this total. It's going to divide it by the number, the length, which is 7. By. So that is that. And then the lowest as well. The lowest is going to be that's the minimum of expense. That's the minimum number in expense. And then we have the highest. That's going to be the maximum of expense. So now we're basically done. Now let's print. So we want to print. So since we are going to be referring, you know what? Let me just continue. So we want to print. The we're going to print the expense itself. We say print, but then how do we refer back to the? That's where the f string comes in. F string is we use it so we can call variables inside of our print function, because when we are printing something when we're using the print function, everything is like a string to the print. Print isn't as a string unless we call the f string to tell print that okay, this particular thing is a variable. So what we want to do here is okay, we want to call the expense. So expense, and then after we call the expense, we're going to use the new line function, which is this. New line that is going to take it to the next line, new line, and then want to call the total as well. So let's just say total expenses. Then total expenses, so we're going to call the total. And then we have the average expense as well. Average expenses. That's going to be, we're going to call the average as well. And then we have the lowest spent. Let's just use lowest spent. We're going to call the lowest. And then we have the lowest spent. And then lastly, the highest expense spent. So we're going to call the highest here. And then, okay, lowest expense spent. And then here, so let's not forget at the end, they are all going to a new line. This one still is going to a new line. It's going to a new line as well. And that's so and okay, so let's do this first. There's something else I need to show us, and then we're basically done. So let's run this code. And then we have 200,000, and then we have this, and then okay, let's type done. You see, it's calculated everything for us already. Total expenses is this, average expenses is this, the lowest expense is this, the highest expense spent is this. So, But then if you look at it, you can see it there, they don't look they don't look right because of the decimal places and all. If you look at this is three decimal place, this is one decimal place, they don't look right. So in this case, we're going to be using the decimal function where we're going to be telling it that anything you're putting, convert it to two decimal places. And this is it. So if we want it to be three decimal place, it will be three. But we want it to be two decimal place. So we're going to use it and then we'll put it here again. At the end of each variable, we'll put it here again. Put it here again. So, so let's run this code again. Let's say 77,000. Then we have 250, 2,500.5567. And then we have 334, okay, 340,000.2423. And then 40,000 and then 10,000 and then maybe we have 200 and then we have 678. So done. So as you can see, it looks more, we can see we have the total expense of this, we have the average expense, everything two decimal places, lowest expense, highest expense as well. This is how you create a simple expense tracker using Python. Thank you.